Okay, so like, hi everyone. Today in this video, I'm going to talk about how people learn a second language. So based on some important theories from like a lot of like famous researchers, like for example, Carson, Michel, and also like Miles and like etc. So basically, I'm going to explain like kind of like the main ideas of like the summary of like what I'm reading or like what I'm getting in the materials that I have been read in on the island. So basically, let's start with Stephen Krashen. So basically, in the 80s, in the 1980s, he kind of like introduced a very famous model called the monitor model. This model basically has like five main parts. So the first one is basically the acquisition or like learning hypothesis. So basically, if I remember correctly, Krashen says that there are like two ways to develop your own language. The first one is acquisitions. Acquisitions happens naturally, like how children learn their first language without thinking about grammar rules or like grammar rules. Like basically, they're kind of just like talk or like gain their language without worrying or needing to basically like made up like a proper sentences or etc without thinking of anything at all, like thinking about like worrying about grammar rules. And then the second one is learning. On the other hand, is conscious, like when we study rules in school, like basically we kind of like learn language in school. We know how to properly say a certain words, especially how you can be able to talk or speak a language based on rules. So like Russian like kind of like believe these are two separated like process. The second part is like also like monitor hypothesis. Russian kind of like says that to learn a system doesn't make us fluent speakers. It only acts like an editor. For example, when we speak like or like acquired, a system produces the sentence, and the learned system can sometimes tap into correct mistakes, but only if we have like enough time and we know the rule. We know the rule. And then the third part is like natural natural order hypothesis. So it kind of like means that people learn grammar in a certain predictable order. Like for example, in English, learners often master the ing, right? Like liking or like running or like speaking before they learn past tense, and past tense before they master the third way, like the third person, which is like s. The other is not always the same as how like teachers present it in class. And then there's also like the fourth part. The fourth part can be input hypothesis. Basically, he says that we learn language when we understand message, right? When we understand messages, they are just a little bit like beyond our current level. He calls this as like I goes one, if I remember correctly. Like for example, if I know some simple English sentences and then I listen to a slightly harder one with new grammar, that's useful input. If it's too easy, if it's like too easy, I don't know. If it's too hard, I don't understand. And then what's the next part? If I remember correctly, the last part is like effective something. I hope you can be able to remember that. It's basically talking about like emotions, like how emotions, like how learners can be able to feel nervous, shy, or stressed. It means like the effective, effective hypothesis can be able to like to be set as high and input cannot get in. But if they feel kind of like relaxed and motivated, the filter is low and they can learn more easily than usual because they're not nervous, they're not like shy or stressed or sometimes. So that's the questions study, if I remember correctly. We can like move to Michelle and Miles, I think. Yeah, Michelle and Miles. So basically, they're explaining that more. They kind of like explain further about questions, like like hypothesis in detail, like basically explaining it furtherly. They also like point out the problems of the said research. Like for example, with the association learning hypothesis, people ask like, can learning ever become a position? Like how pressure so slow, but other scholars think maybe yes, we can learn to be we can learn that. Like with the monitor hypothesis, some learners become like overusers and constantly check every ruler, so they speak very slowly. Like what I'm doing now. I think I have no idea if I speak too fast or like too slow. But I wish, like, I hope I can be able to like speak slower, I guess, so people can be able to understand what I'm saying. And then like others are under users. No, others are like, yeah, whatever, who never check, so they make lots of mistakes. The problem is, it's hard to test this idea actually, because like, yeah, the natural order hypothesis is partly, like partially true, but it doesn't really explain individual differences or like language transfer. Like, maybe I can like prove what I'm talking about by like example. Someone's first language may affect how they learn English. Like for example, I talk in my mother tongue is Indonesian, right? Like my first language is Indonesian, but my foreign language is English. And because of the habits that I have in my mother tongue language, it's kind of like a problem with me to learn a new language, especially English, because like in Indonesia, I cannot be able to say a certain word properly. Not certain word properly. It's more of like I. It's more of like how I tend to say like or pause for a few minutes and then like yeah, like this for example. And because of that, it kind of like brought my bad habits to the new language that I'm trying to learn. And then what's next? And then there's like, if I remember correctly, there's like implicit learning. Basically, implicit learning is like how you learn something unconscious. It happens like when we are exposed to language and slowly picking it up from your parents since you were born, without noticing. Like for example, I learned like I think like I kind of like my mother tongue is Indonesian, but you can also call Minang in a way, because I learned both of those without noticing or like unconscious, because like I talk with those two languages with my parents or like with my family all the time. But then when it comes to explicit learning, it's like we're feeling conscious. It happens when we study rules, we study grammar books and or exercises, etc. And that's me with English. I have to study English by my own. I have to watch like YouTube videos. I have to talk to the native speakers so I can be able to improve my English knowledge. But actually, some researchers say second language learning is mostly implicit. Like, for example, maybe I can prove it to you with an example. Like, universal grammar theory says learners build knowledge unconsciously by processing input. Meanwhile, connectionism also says that frequent exposure. No. So says that frequent exposure to like lots of new words might helps learners to learn patterns like automatically, especially like structures when it comes to grammar rules. Others say that both explicit and implicit learning are both of those are actually important, especially like when you're learning a new language. Like for example, skill theory says adults may start really like unconscious no conscious rules, like learning grammar consciously, constantly, like you're aware that you're learning a new language, so you have to study it by yourself. But with practice, these rules becomes like automatic and implicit. So at first, learners may need to think about the rule, but later they just use it without effort. What's next? If I remember correctly, I think there's oh yeah there's like the researchers also explained the adaptive control model. It basically like learners have to move from you know like knowing a rule to actually practicing it to basically using that new language automatically without thinking. So basically, effective filter basically emotions that we're experiencing can be able to affect a certain language, yeah, based on our emotions basically. uh, yeah, I think that's all that I can be able to explain in this topic. So I hope you can be able to know or like to learn a bunch of like things from this video, and I hope you can be able to gain lots of new knowledges, like new knowledge from my from my explanation, etc, etc. But that's all that I can remember, so I would like to apologize for that. So assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.